April 10, 1941. Dawn breaks over the Libyan desert like a cracked eggshell, spilling golden light across endless dunes that shimmer with heat even before the sun climbs high. Dust devils whirl in the distance, and the air hums with the low growl of approaching engines, panzer tanks grinding forward, their treads chewing sand into submission. Italian General Italo Garibaldi stands atop a command vehicle, binoculars pressed to his eyes, a smirk curling under his mustache as he surveys the ramshackle defenses of Tobruk. "Look at them," he mutters to his aides, voice dripping with disdain. "Australians in their rat holes, makeshift trenches, barbed wire scavenged from who knows where. They'll crumble like biscotti under our boots." The Axis forces surge ahead, confident and relentless. Rommel's Afrika Korps, the legendary desert fox at the helm, has already swept through Cyrenaica like a sandstorm, capturing Benghazi and pushing the British Eighth Army into retreat. Now, Tobruk, a vital port on the Mediterranean coast, stands as the last thorn in their side. Garibaldi laughs outright as reports come in. The defenders are mostly the 9th Australian Division under Lieutenant General Leslie Morshead, dug into positions that look more like a hasty foxhole than a fortress. "Rats of Tobruk," one Italian officer sneers, coining the term that will soon haunt them. The Australians, fresh from Greece and ill-equipped for desert warfare, huddle in their slit trenches, Bren guns at the ready, sweat soaking their khaki uniforms as the first Stuka dive bombers scream overhead. You can almost feel the ground tremble as the Junkers Ju-87s plunge, sirens wailing like banshees, unleashing bombs that crater the earth in plumes of fire and grit. Shrapnel whistles through the air, and men dive for cover, faces pressed into the scorching sand. Private Jack Edmondson of the 217th Battalion grips his rifle tighter, heart pounding as he peers over the parapet. The Italians and Germans advance in waves, infantry supported by Mark III panzers, their 50mm guns barking shells that explode against the anti-tank ditches. Morshead's orders are clear: hold the line at all costs, no retreat. The port's harbor, lined with wrecked ships from earlier raids, must remain in Allied hands to deny Rommel his supply lifeline. But the mockery echoes from the Axis lines. Mussolini's commanders, emboldened by early victories, broadcast propaganda leaflets fluttering down like mocking confetti. "Surrender, you rats! Your empire crumbles!" Garibaldi, coordinating with Rommel's staff, dismisses the defenses as primitive, scoffing at the captured Italian artillery the Australians have turned against them, old 75mm guns jury-rigged into firing positions. Rommel himself, the wiry field marshal with his trademark goggles pushed up on his forehead, nods in agreement during a hasty briefing. "They'll break by nightfall," he predicts, his voice clipped and assured. The Axis forces press on, machine guns chattering as the sun climbs and turns the desert into an oven. Wave after wave crashes against Tobruk's perimeter. A panzer rolls forward, turret swiveling, only to bog down in a hidden minefield, explosions rippling like thunderclaps, black smoke billowing. Australian sappers, working under cover of darkness the night before, have laced the approaches with deadly surprises. Sergeant Tom Diver Derrick leads a counterattack, his platoon charging out with bayonets fixed, shouting war cries that cut through the din. Bren light machine guns stutter in rhythmic bursts, mowing down advancing infantry who falter in the open ground. As dusk falls, the assault slows. Garibaldi's smirk fades as reports of casualties filter in, hundreds lost, tanks disabled, Stukas returning with empty bomb bays, but no breakthrough. The Australians hold, their trenches a labyrinth of death. Morshead tours the lines by jeep, his face grim under the fading light, encouraging his men with a nod and a word. "We've bloodied their nose, lads, but they'll come again." The port lights flicker faintly in the distance, a beacon of defiance. Yet in the Axis camp, the laughter turns to grumbling.
How could these rats withstand the might of two empires? The night brings uneasy quiet, broken only by sporadic artillery fire. Rommel paces his tent, maps spread before him, realizing this siege won't end quickly. But as the stars wheel overhead, a deeper strategy brews, one that will lead to captured spoils and a chilling revelation. What if victory here reveals not strength, but the shadow of doom?
The sun rises again on April 11th, 1941, already merciless, turning the desert into a furnace before breakfast. Inside Tobruk's perimeter, the Australians wake to the familiar whine of Stuka engines circling like vultures. Morsehead's headquarters, a dugout carved into limestone, smells of sweat, cordite, and strong tea. The general stands over a sand table map, fingers tracing the thin red line of Yauder defenses. "They'll hit the western sector again," he says quietly. "Same as yesterday. We give them hell, then we give them more." Outside, the rats are already in position. Slit trenches zigzag for miles, connected by communication saps barely deep enough to crawl. Men in dusty slouch hats peer through periscopes fashioned from broken mirrors and tin cans. Private Bluey Truscott of the 213th Battalion loads another belt into his Bren, the gun's barrel still warm from the previous night's harassing fire. The Australians have nicknamed their positions with grim humor: the salient, the cemetery, post R58. Every yard of ground is paid for in blood. At 0630, the barrage begins. German 88mm flak guns, pressed into service as anti-tank weapons, slam shells into the wire. Dust billows so thick it blots out the sun. Men cough and spit grit. Then come the panzers, Mark IIIs and IVs rolling in tight formation, dust plumes trailing like battle flags. Behind them, Italian infantry in green tunics advance in hesitant waves, urged on by officers waving pistols. Rommel watches from a forward observation post, field glasses steady, calculating angles of fire and timing of the next Stuka strike. The first tanks reach the anti-tank ditch and halt, bogged or blown apart by mines laid the night before. Australian 25-pounder field guns, concealed in shallow pits and camouflaged with scrub, open up at point-blank range. Shells rip through thin side armor, turrets jam, crews bail out only to be cut down by Vickers machine guns chattering from sandbagged nests. One panzer commander, Lieutenant Heinrich von Grollmann, scrambles from his burning hull waving a white cloth. He is taken prisoner, dazed, muttering, "Impossible, impossible." Above, the Stukas dive again, black crosses stark against the sky. Bombs walk across the perimeter in fiery steps. A direct hit collapses a section of trench, screams rise, then are silenced by falling earth. Yet the line holds. Australian sappers dash forward under fire, dragging wounded mates back to cover. Medics work in the open, bandaging shattered limbs with hands slick with blood. Morsehead's voice crackles over the field telephone. "Stand fast. No man leaves his post unless he's dead." By midday, the assault falters. Italian troops break and run, pursued by long bursts of Bren fire. German panzers withdraw, leaving smoking wrecks as monuments to overconfidence. Rommel lowers his binoculars, jaw tight. He had expected a swift collapse. Instead, he faces a fortress that refuses to fall. In the Italian headquarters tent, Garibaldi's smirk earlier has vanished. He paces, shouting at staff officers, demanding fresh attacks. They are rats. Rats can be smoked out. But the rats are not breaking. At night, they creep into no man's land, raiding Italian positions for water, food, even ammunition. They capture Breda machine guns and turn them against their former owners. They booby-trap abandoned vehicles. They sing rude songs across the lines, voices carrying on the cool night air, taunting the besiegers. The nickname Rats of Tobruk, first hurled as an insult, begins to stick in a different way. Proud, defiant, unbreakable. Rommel knows time is bleeding away.
His supply lines stretch back hundreds of miles across open desert, vulnerable to RAF raids from Malta and the long-range desert group's hit-and-run ambushes. Every day Tobruk holds is another day the Afrika Korps cannot advance toward Egypt in the Suez Canal. He orders probing attacks, night patrols, artillery duels, but the perimeter remains intact. As the siege stretches into weeks, then months, a strange rhythm settles over the battlefield. Dawn barrages, midday heat that kills as surely as bullets, evening raids under starlight. The Australians dig deeper, improvise, endure. Morsehead becomes a legend among his men, calm, unyielding, always visible at the front. We'll hold Tobruk or we'll die in it. Yet far to the east, another battle is brewing, one not of trenches and tanks, but of captured warehouses and overflowing supply dumps. Rommel's next thrust will carry him deep into British territory, where he will seize treasures beyond his wildest dreams and glimpse a truth that will chill him to the bone.
October 1942. The long desert summer has scorched everything it touched, but now the nights carry a chill that seeps into bones. Rommel's headquarters, a cluster of camouflage trucks and tents hidden in a wadi near El Alamein, glows faintly with lantern light. The field marshal, thinner now, eyes shadowed from weeks of relentless strain, pores over captured British maps spread across a folding table. Dust clings to his uniform. His famous peaked cap sits beside him like a tired sentinel. Outside, the Afrika Korps rests uneasily after their lightning thrust eastward, the last great gamble before the British could regroup. Just days earlier, on the 30th of August, Rommel had launched Operation Brandung, the final push to break through the Alamein line and reach Alexandria. Panzers roared across the southern flank, Italian infantry trailing behind, all eyes on the prize, the British supply dumps at Alam el-Halfa and beyond. The attack faltered under RAF Hurricanes and Kitty Hawks that strafed columns by day, while Australian night patrols mined the paths and ambushed stragglers. But enough ground was gained, enough that on the morning of September 1st, forward reconnaissance units broke into the sprawling British depots abandoned in the retreat. Rommel arrives at one such dump himself, jeep bouncing over rutted sand tracks, escorted by a handful of panzer grenadiers. What he finds stops him cold. Row upon row of neatly stacked jerry cans, thousands upon thousands, filled with high-octane aviation fuel and diesel, crates of American tinned rations, Spam, corned beef, condensed milk, mountains of ammunition boxes stamped USA, 30 caliber rounds, 75mm shells, even brand new 6-pounder anti-tank guns still in grease. Trucks lined up like soldiers on parade, Ford and Chevrolet 4x4s, tires barely worn, engines gleaming under canvas covers. A staff officer approaches, saluting. Herr Feldmarschall, there are more dumps like this stretching for miles. The Tommies left it all behind. Rommel walks the aisles in silence. He runs a gloved hand over a crate of K-rations, lifts a can of peaches in heavy syrup, reads the label printed in crisp English. He turns to his quartermaster, voice low. How much? The answer comes quietly. Enough fuel to keep the Afrika Korps mobile for months, enough food to feed 2 divisions indefinitely, enough spare parts to rebuild battered panzers from the scrap heap. And yet, the sheer volume unnerves him. These are not the careful, rationed supplies of the Reich. This is abundance on a scale the Wehrmacht has never known. American industry, untouched by bombs, churning out materiel faster than Germany can destroy it. That evening, in the dim light of his command tent, Rommel sits with his inner circle, General Fritz Bayerlein, Chief of Staff Siegfried Westphal, a few trusted aides. The map is rolled away, coffee steams in tin mugs. He speaks softly, almost to himself. We have taken their treasure houses, and in doing so, we have seen the future. He pauses, staring at the flame of the lamp.
They can replace every tank we burn, every shell we fire, every man we kill. We cannot, not anymore. Westphal nods grimly. He has seen the same numbers. Bayerlein shifts uncomfortably. No one speaks for a long moment. Rommel stands, walks to the tent flap, and looks out at the star-pricked desert sky. The distant rumble of artillery echoes from the Alamein line, Montgomery's guns already probing, already preparing the counterstroke. The captured bounty has bought time, perhaps weeks, but not victory. The Afrika Korps is fed and fueled, yet the horizon is closing in. Rommel knows the arithmetic now. Every mile they advance only lengthens the supply line. They cannot hope to defend against the growing Allied air power and the fresh divisions pouring in from America and Britain. He returns to the table, picks up a single can of American peaches, turns it in his hands. This, he says quietly, is what dooms us. Not the rats in their trenches at Tobruk, not the sandstorms or the malaria, not even Montgomery's careful planning. It is the endless river of steel and food and fuel, flowing across oceans the Luftwaffe cannot reach. Triumph has become a mirror, and the reflection is defeat. Outside, a sentry coughs in the cold night air. The Afrika Korps sleeps fitfully, bellies full for the first time in months, but their commander lies awake, the weight of certainty pressing down like the desert itself. The next battle will come soon, and when it does, the line at Alamein will not bend. It will break the Axis dream forever.
October 23, 1942. 21:40 hours. The moon hangs low and thin over the El Alamein front, casting long, ghostly shadows across minefields and barbed wire. In the forward trenches of the 9th Australian Division, now part of Montgomery's carefully rebuilt 8th Army, men lie flat on their bellies, faces pressed to the sand, waiting. The air is thick with diesel fumes, cordite, and the metallic taste of fear. Lieutenant Colonel Bernard Evans of the 2/48th Battalion whispers last-minute orders down the line. When the guns stop, we go. Fast. No hesitation. Then it begins. At 21:40 precisely, nearly 1,000 British, Australian and New Zealand guns roared as one. The horizon lights up like a second dawn, flashes so bright they turn night into stuttering day. Shells scream overhead in a continuous deafening curtain. The ground heaves, men feel the concussions in their chests. Italian and German positions vanish under fountains of earth and flame. Forward observers crouch in shell craters, calling corrections while dust chokes their throats. Rommel, miles to the rear in a commandeered Italian villa, awakes to the thunder. He knows immediately, this is no raid. This is the hammer falling. The barrage lasts 12 minutes, an eternity in combat. When it lifts, the silence is worse than the noise. Then the pipes and bugles sound. Australian infantry rise from their slits like ghosts in khaki, bayonets fixed, and charge into the smoke. They move in small, disciplined groups, following white tape laid through the minefields the night before. Sappers lead the way, probing with bayonets, marking safe lanes with white ribbon that glows faintly under moonlight. Mines explode in vicious flashes, men disappear in red mist, but the advance keeps moving. At point 29, a low rise that commands the northern corridor, the 2/17th Battalion hits the Italian 62nd Infantry Regiment's positions. The defenders, stunned by the bombardment, barely get their braiders firing before Australians are among them, grenades arcing through the air, bayonets flashing in the muzzle bursts. Private Stan Gurney, already a Victoria Cross winner from Tobruk days, storms a machine gun post single-handed, silencing it with grenades and rifle fire, before collapsing from wounds that will soon claim him. His mates press on, shouting his name like a battle cry. Further south,
The 2/23rd Battalion fights through the Devil's Gardens, Rommel's infamous minefields layered with anti-personnel mines, telemines and barbed wire. Engineers crawl forward under fire, cutting lanes with Bangalore torpedoes that erupt in long, ripping explosions. Panzers counterattack in the moonlight, Mark IIIs and IVs grinding forward, 75mm guns barking. Australian 6-pounders, dragged into position under cover of darkness, open up at under 300 yards. Shells slam into frontal armour, turrets spin wildly as crews abandon burning hulls. One panzer commander, Captain Hans von Luck, watches his company melt away in minutes, radioing frantically, enemy infantry everywhere, breakthrough imminent. Rommel arrives at the front by dawn on the 24th, jeep racing along rutted tracks as shells burst nearby. He sees the reality, gaps torn in the line, Italian divisions crumbling, German reserves committed piecemeal and cut to pieces by RAF fighter bombers that now own the sky. The captured supply dumps from 2 months earlier, once a windfall, are already dwindling. Fuel trucks burn on the coastal road, ammunition trains are strafed before they can unload. The Axis Corps fights with savage skill, but every counterthrust costs tanks and men they cannot replace. Back in Tobruk's old perimeter, now far behind Allied lines, the rats who once held the port against impossible odds watch the 8th Army roll forward. Some of the original 9th Division veterans have returned for this fight, slouch hats still tilted defiantly, scars from 1941 still visible under sunburned skin. They recognise the same grim determination in the fresh units charging past. Hold, then push, then never look back. By November 4, the Axis line shatters. Rommel orders retreat, first a fighting withdrawal, then a rout. Italian troops throw away rifles and run. German rearguards fight to the last round to cover the escape. The Desert Fox, exhausted and ill, climbs into his staff car one final time, looking back at the smoke rising from El Alamein. He knows the truth he glimpsed in those captured depots has become certainty. The war in Africa is lost. The road to Tunis lies open, and with it the beginning of the end for the Axis in the Mediterranean. The rats of Tobruk, mocked and underestimated, had bought the time that made this moment possible. Their stubborn defence in 1941 slowed Rommel just long enough for the industrial colossus across the oceans to awaken. Now that colossus has struck, and the desert belongs to the Allies.
November 5th, 1942. Dawn bleeds red across the Katara Depression, painting the retreating columns of the Afrika Korps in the color of fresh wounds. Dust hangs in choking curtains behind the last panzers, still capable of movement, fewer than 40 now, many towing crippled brothers or towed themselves by half-tracks running on fumes. Italian soldiers shuffle alongside the road in ragged files, rifles slung like burdens they no longer believe in. A few still wear the green feathers in their hats, most have thrown them away. The once proud Littorio and Ariete divisions are ghosts now, reduced to stragglers begging water from passing German trucks. Rommel rides in the front seat of his captured British staff car, goggles crusted with sand, scarf pulled tight against the cold morning wind. His driver, Corporal Albert Butcher, keeps his eyes fixed on the rutted coastal track, swerving around bomb craters left by the relentless RAF. Every few miles they pass the blackened skeletons of vehicles, a Fiat truck gutted by cannon fire, a Panzer IV with its turret blown clean off, an 88mm gun lying on its side like a felled giant. Scavengers, Bedouin boys and desperate soldiers already pick at the wreckage, dragging away tires, jerry cans, anything that might buy another day of life. In the rear-view mirror, smoke still rises from Mersa Matruh and Sidi Barani, supply dumps torched to deny them to the pursuers. But the 8th Army does not pause. Montgomery's armor rolls forward in disciplined waves, Matildas and Valentines grinding through the soft sand, Crusaders darting ahead like hounds on the scent.
Above them, Spitfires and Kitty Hawks prowl in pairs, pouncing on anything that moves. The sky belongs to them now. The Luftwaffe is a memory of contrails long faded. Rommel's mind replays the moment in the captured depot 2 months earlier. The endless rows of American crates, the labels promising more where that came from. He had taken the bounty, yes, fed his men, refueled his tanks, patched his divisions for one last throw. But the arithmetic had never lied. For every Sherman knocked out, 2 more appeared on the horizon. For every Stuka lost to Akak, a squadron of hurry bombers took its place. The industrial heart of the United States, untouched factories, untouched workers, untouched oceans, pumped life into the Allied war machine, while Germany bled from every front. He turns to Bayerlin, seated behind him on a crate of looted British biscuits. "We held Tobruk for months with nothing," Rommel says, voice rough from dust and fatigue. "Now we cannot hold a line with everything." Bayerlin nods once, no words needed. They both know the truth. The rats in their limestone dugouts had not merely delayed Rommel, they had given the Allies the one commodity more precious than fuel or steel: time. Time for Churchill to rally, for Roosevelt to commit, for factories in Detroit and Birmingham to shift from cars to tanks. Time for convoys to cross the Atlantic unmolested now that Dönitz's U-boats were being hunted instead of hunting. Time for a cautious general named Montgomery to learn patience, to build overwhelming force, to strike only when the odds were insurmountable. The column halts briefly near Fuka. Rommel steps out, stretches cramped legs and looks westward. The Mediterranean glitters cruelly blue under the climbing sun. Somewhere beyond the horizon lies Tripoli, then Tunis, then the end of Africa for the Axis. He lights a cigarette with hands that no longer tremble, only because exhaustion has burned away the capacity for fear. A young lieutenant approaches, salutes, reports that Italian rearguards are holding a ridge against Australian infantry. Rommel exhales smoke. Tell them to hold as long as they can, then fall back. No illusions left, no grand counteroffensives, only delay. As the Afrika Korps limps westward, the name Rats of Tobruk travels with them, not as mockery now, but as a quiet legend. In mess tents and dugouts, German soldiers speak of the Australians the way men speak of storms that nearly drowned them, with grudging respect and a shiver at how close they came. Those makeshift trenches, those captured Italian guns turned against their makers, those men who refused to break, they had been the first crack in the myth of invincibility. Rommel climbs back into the car. The engine coughs to life. The column moves again, slower now, a long funeral procession for an empire's dream. Behind them, the desert swallows the past. Ahead lies only the certainty of defeat, written in American tin cans and Australian bayonets. And in the quiet, after the guns fell silent, one truth remained, etched deeper than any shell crater. Arrogance had laughed at the rats. The rats had answered with steel, sweat, and unbreakable will. And the laughing stopped forever.
November 1942 fades into December, and the chase across Libya turns into a long, bitter withdrawal. The Afrika Korps, once the terror of the desert, now moves like a wounded animal, shedding men, machines, and illusions with every mile. Tripoli falls on January 23, 1943, without a major fight. The port's docks are littered with burning fuel drums and abandoned Italian artillery. Rommel, flown out to Germany days earlier on Hitler's orders, leaves behind a command fractured and demoralized. In Berlin, the Führer greets him with cold fury, demanding another miracle. Rommel, gaunt and hollow-eyed, can only offer silence. Far to the east, in the rebuilt streets of Tobruk, the original rats begin to receive their due. The port, so stubbornly defended in 1941, now serves as a major supply hub for the advancing Eighth Army.
Australian engineers repair the shattered quays. Convoys unload mountains of crates stamped with the same American markings Rommel once marveled at in the captured dumps. The men of the 9th Division, many still bearing the scars of those 242 days under siege, watch the endless stream of trucks and tanks rolling westward. They do not boast. They do not need to. The desert remembers. In Cairo and Alexandria, newspapers carry the headlines, "Rats of Tobruk turn the tide." War correspondents flock to interview survivors. Lieutenant General Leslie Morshed, promoted, decorated, but still the same quiet, iron-willed officer, refuses most requests. When pressed, he says simply, "We held because we had to. The rest followed." His men, though, speak more freely in mess halls and canteens. They tell stories of nights spent wiring booby traps under Italian searchlights, of dawn stand-tos when the first Stuka appeared like a black angel, of mates lost to shrapnel who still seemed to stand watch in the empty trenches. The nickname that once stung now hangs on their shoulders like a badge of honor. Across the ocean, in American factories, the connection is less romantic but no less real. Workers in Detroit bolt together Sherman tanks on assembly lines that never sleep. In Chicago, women rivet B-17 fuselages. In California, Liberty ships slide down slipways faster than anyone thought possible. The cans of peaches, the jerry cans of fuel, the endless ammunition, these are not mere supplies. They are the weights that tipped the scales. Rommel saw it first in those captured depots. Montgomery wielded it at Alamein. The rats had given the world those extra months to bring the Colossus fully awake. Years later, in reunions and memoirs, German veterans would speak of Tobruk with a strange mixture of bitterness and respect. Hauptmann Hans von Luck, who fought through the breakout battles, wrote, "We called them rats. We were wrong. They were wolves in rat holes." Italian survivors, less poetic, simply shook their heads and muttered about the Australians who never knew when to quit. The desert itself changes slowly. Wind erases tire tracks, sand drifts over slit trenches, wildflowers bloom briefly each spring where men once bled. Yet the story endures, not in stone monuments, but in the quiet certainty that a small force of determined men, mocked and underestimated, can alter the course of empires. Tobruk was not the end of the war in Africa. It was the first undeniable signal that the Axis tide had turned. Rommel never returned to the desert. He died in 1944, forced to take his own life after the July plot against Hitler. His final letters speak of disillusionment, of a war lost long before the guns fell silent at Alamein. The rats, by contrast, came home to a nation that finally understood their stubborn stand. Medals were pinned, parades held, but the deepest recognition came in the eyes of those who had fought beside them. A nod, a raised glass, the unspoken knowledge that some lines are simply not meant to be crossed. In the end, the mocking laughter of Italian generals and the cold calculations of the Desert Fox were answered not with grand speeches or superior strategy alone, but with grit, bayonets, and an unbreakable refusal to yield. The rats did not run, they held.